Hi guys, Lee here from FPL Family, back with another deep dive, 10 minutes on every single Premier League club between now and the start of the season. And today I'm here to discuss new boys, Brentford. And what I want to discuss first is the way that these guys finished last season in the Championship. They finished with aplomb. Let me tell you, their end of season run, I think it was in their game week 34 by the looks of it. Brentford went away to Norwich and lost 1-0. That was it. Apart from that, their final few games were sensational, particularly the last four there. 4 straight wins to finish the season. And then, of course, got in via the playoffs. So here's a team that if they can carry on that momentum and that good feeling from the back end of last season, that air of invincibility, going away to Preston North End and winning 5-0, for example, if they can carry on that mentality and that approach, they're going to do very, very well this season. First of all, I want to talk about, before we get into players and who I might pick, and there's one particular frontman that I think is going to be on a lot of your watch lists, let's talk about their fixtures and how they start the season, because actually if you look at the Fantasy Football Scout ticker and look at the first 5 fixtures for Brentford, they don't look too bad. Home to Arsenal, I personally think that is a really nice start to the season. They're going to be properly up for that, Brentford, and there's a North London derby that I think Arsenal wouldn't have wanted that. I don't think if you'd have showed them the fixtures, Arsenal at the beginning of the season said, hey, you're going away to Brentford on the first day, I'm actually not sure that's a fixture that you want on day one, because that Brentford crowd you'd think are going to be up for it. Then they go away to Crystal Palace, away at Villa, home to Brighton before a trip to Wolves. So 3 away games in the first 5, but actually, if you sort by difficulty on the Fantasy Football Scout ticker, it doesn't look too bad on paper. It doesn't look too bad. However, careful for what comes next, because if you extend that fixture run out from the first 5 to the first 9, here's how it looks. They drop from the kind of middle of the road there, looking good on paper fixture list, to suddenly looking very, very difficult. So from game week 6, where they host Liverpool, they go away to West Ham, home Chelsea, home Leicester. So listen, there's plenty of home games in there for Brentford, but Liverpool, West Ham, Chelsea, Leicester is a fixture run that you'd want to be a little bit careful of, I'd suggest, guys. That's all. So listen, if you want to go in on some of these Brentford assets, the beginning of the season is probably the time to do it. And if you're going to play that early wildcard, if that's going to be your strategy for this season, as it probably will be for mine and has been for the last few seasons, to be honest, getting off of those Brentford assets, if they're not performing in the first 5 game weeks, game week 6 is probably not a bad time to do it. But if you want to go in on Tony or any of these other guys that I'll talk about in a second, then probably you're probably thinking about game week 1 drafts. You're probably thinking about starting the season with these guys and seeing how it goes. And if it pays off, great. And if it doesn't, game week 6 is probably an all right time to switch them out. Because as of then, Liverpool, West Ham, Chelsea, Leicester, not fixtures that necessarily you'd want Brentford players for. Let's talk about their goal scorers then. Let's talk about the man, the myth, the legend, that already seems to be an FPL legend. A lot of you have already got him in your teams at 6.5 million. Ivan Toney comes into the league on the back of 44 appearances for Brentford last season. So pretty much a mainstay in that side, fairly injury-free last season. Touch wood, he can stay injury-free in the Premier League. Obviously, you've got far more physicality in the Premier League, but actually just look at the guy, right? He seems like the sort of striker, and the bits and pieces that I'm not going to sit here and say that I watched him a lot in the Championship, but the bits and pieces that I saw of him, he is a guy that physically looks as if he could do well in the Premier League. He's got the stature for it. But look at those goals there. Brentford are very highly reliant on Ivan Toney for goals. Now listen, there's penalties in there as well. I don't know how many of those 31 goals were penalties. I'm sure you guys can get in the comments below. But I think I read somewhere about 8, 9, 10 of those were penalties from last season. So a decent proportion of them are. But listen, we like those, right? If we've got a player at 6.5 million who's going to take penalties as well as scoring goals, then you've got to have a look at him. Sergei Canos is another one to have a look at, and Brian and Mbumo as well. Now, Mbumo did play kind of off of Toney in the playoff final. Watch that game, and Brian Mbumo kind of played slightly off of Toney. So look out for that. He could be a slightly out of position option there in midfield for UFPL managers. But Sergei Canos, also one of the more creative players in that midfield, but 9 goals from him, so plenty of goal threat coming from him from midfield. And again, 33 appearances, so obviously less than Toney, but still fairly regular and still pretty reliable. A bit further down the list, I don't think anybody's looking necessarily at Brentford defence from the off. But listen, the fixtures are there for them to get some reasonable results, potentially pick up a clean sheet or two at the beginning of the season. And in Dalsgaard and Sorensen, they do have a little bit of goal threat there. There's a couple of defenders, got a couple of goals each. Now, obviously, it's going to be more difficult for them in the Premier League. We know this, right? But actually, a couple of goals there. There is some goal threat from Dalsgaard and from Sorensen. And again, these guys not coming on as subs necessarily. Dalsgaard in particular, 34 starts, and Sorensen 29 starts. So these guys you'd think are going to be, if not 90-minute men, then they're going to be pretty nailed on in that defence. So those are the two, I think, if you were going to look at anybody in the Brentford defence, those are probably the two that you might look at for goal threat. And again, guys, I'm by no means, because these guys are new boys, I am by no means an expert. I need to watch these guys in the Premier League and see how they get on. So again, get in the comments below. If you're a Brentford fan, if you know this Brentford team, I would love to hear from you. Sam and I would love to hear from you, because the FPL community, it feels like we're all going towards Ivan Toney. Not a bad thing, 31 goals, right? And even more than that if you total them all up across all the different competitions that Brentford played in. But with 31 goals, he looks like potentially the one to have. If not, Sergio Canos from midfield. If you want to take one of those midfield slots up, 9 goals and a few assists as well for Sergio Canos last season. Those are the two, with Mbeumo, maybe the 3 that I would be looking at. Those are the ones to keep an eye on. But Toney clearly is the one to keep front of mind. However, one thing to notice with Toney is that he uses his physicality, right? So plenty of goals there, a really, really good target man, but has a bit of a penchant for a booking, right? Has picked up 7 yellow cards in the Championship last season, and a red as well. So, listen, again, I'm not thinking that Toney's going to be banging in 2 or 3 goals a game in the Premier League. He might, and if he does, he's going to be sensational value at 6.5. But listen, if he doesn't, and he's just getting that odd goal per game, plus he might be getting booked, or he's got a bit of a disciplinary record in the Premier League, maybe he gets a bit more frustrated and he starts picking up those bookings with a bit more regularity, that will affect the bonus point system. We've seen that from lots of different players, right? Players that like to get the goal but then get the yellow card, and all of a sudden that affects the BPS, it affects the bonus points. And unlike a Raul Jimenez or a Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who tend not to pick up those bookings, so when they score, and Danny Ings is another one, when they score, they tend to get the 9 points, or they get the 10 points, because they get the bonus points to go alongside the goal. Just watch out for Toney's disciplinary record potentially affecting his bonus point potential as well. Sergio Canos, who I mentioned on the previous chart there as not just a midfield playmaker, but a player that gets goals as well. Also 5 bookings. So again, this is not terrible, guys. This is just for me to make you aware that these guys do pick up the odd booking. Same as Dalsgaard at the back there. Although only 4 yellow cards across the season in the Championship for a defender that played as many games as Dalsgaard doesn't feel too bad, to be honest with you. It's probably okay. So Toney is the one. He's the player that provides that physicality up front. So just look out for him picking up the odd booking. That's all I would say. So there we go, guys. That's it. A very quick 10 minutes on Brentford. Let me know what you think of the new boys coming into the season. I personally think that they could do pretty well. They've got the momentum from the back end of last season. Only 1 defeat in the last something like 10 or 11 games. Going to be on a high from the playoff final as well, which is a fantastic game. Ivan Toney coming into FPL at 6.5 comes in with a reputation. We saw it a couple of seasons ago with Pukki. Some of us kind of didn't go in there early on Pukki, and then he scored against Liverpool first game, started ticking over those goals for Norwich, and a lot of us got onto Pukki pretty quickly after that, and then he kind of faded a little bit later on in the season. I wonder whether Toney's going to take the same, whether he's going to use that as a template. I don't know. Hopefully not. I think Toney, given the fact that he's got penalties, given that he's got an eye for goal, and he's got a bit of creativity around him with Mbeumo and with Canos, I think plenty of goals in the Premier League are coming for Ivan Toney, and at 6.5 could be sensational value. Certainly over those first 5 fixtures, they look great. From game week 6, as I mentioned before, not so great, but the first 5 look good. Guys, hopefully you're enjoying the deep dive videos. If you are, hit that subscribe button. Plenty more content coming from us over the summer, and loads more to come between now and the end of the season. Leave the video a like, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.